Welcome to the Regista Room, the podcast where soccer goes off field. Here's your host, Paul Varian.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to the Regista Room where amateur soccer goes off field. And hopefully, welcome back to many of you who've already tuned into our first episode, which focused on the theme of mindset. If you haven't already checked it out, make sure you do. After you've listened to this podcast, 2 great interviews with Olympic gold medalist rower Adam Creek and Rob Gillis, president of Nova Scotia's own United DFC, there for you to enjoy. So, the big news since I spoke to you last been the release of the first of my new sport business e-tutorial series on capituslearning.com. So this is the first of a series of 8 e-tutorials that are designed for you to get access to the quality sport leadership professional development you need remotely online. So these tutorials are accessible to you on demand when you want and where you want. I'll be releasing a new e-tutorial every month at the top of the month. And we'll be aligning the content here in the Regista Room as much as possible to what's delivered in these e-tutorials. So if you haven't already, check out the first one, which is on the fundamentals of sport governance at capituslearning.com. Don't forget to subscribe there too. And you can view the free trailer to get a sense of what it's all about and then rent the e-tutorial for a week to watch as often as you like during the week for just $39.99. So, on to our first theme, or our theme should I say, for this episode of the Regista Room, which is innovation. Now, a few thoughts on innovation before we bring in our guests. Truth be told, I don't think innovation is something I'd say amateur soccer has embraced well in the past, and there are many reasons for this. Firstly, I think the rules-based culture that dominates organised sports at large means organisations or individuals aren't really encouraged to innovate, nor are they rewarded for it. Combine that with limited resources that exist in amateur sport, and it creates prohibitive risk and a lack of ownership many people sitting on the boards of traditional not-for-profit amateur soccer organizations feel exists too. And you'll find people are generally happy on this to take the safe path well traveled by, rather than face the uncomfortable risk that innovation brings. The risk is simply too high in most people's minds, and they often don't feel they have permission to make these bold, courageous calls anyway, if they're sitting on the board of directors of one of these organizations for a relatively short period of time. As such, innovation and disruption in the system has traditionally and often occurred by those running their own private soccer academies or renegades outside the system where the rules simply don't apply to them anyway. But the last 2 years have been different. Innovation has leapt to the forefront of amateur soccer management because during this pandemic time, soccer organizations have had to pivot, flip, dug, weave, dodge, call it what you like, from the incessant barrage of change and uncertainty that the pandemic has continued to throw at us. And in many cases, there's been no choice in this. It's been a case of either innovate or shut up shop. Watching this unfold from the outside looking in, as us consultants tend to do, something's become apparent to me. Those amateur soccer organizations that have chosen to innovate and change quickly have fared best during these times. Those that have not often have remained closed, waiting for the world to return back to normal. But here's the problem. It's becoming more and more clear that the normal of 2019 simply ain't coming back. Whether it's residual health and safety protocols or a new era in what a workplace looks like that we've been flung into, it doesn't feel like we're going to ever head back to 2019. Why not? Well, look carefully. It's not because we ultimately aren't able to return to the life of 2019. It's actually more, I believe, because we don't want to. Yes, I said it, and it sounds odd. But this pandemic's actually created new opportunity and pushed organizations to try new things, innovate, and take risks that they wouldn't previously have had the courage nor permission to do. The outcome? A whole load of things that have actually made the amateur soccer system better off in the long run because some organizations took the bull by the horns and innovated in those times of adversity. Well, what things I hear some of you crying? Well, some of my guests on this episode of the Register Room will outline some shortly. But leaving those points aside, just think about how we've innovated our workplace to avoid costly and unnecessary office space. Or how we've moved people, particularly our volunteers, along to adopt technology more openly and readily. Or how we've moved to strengthen our relationship with our community partners, if we are indeed community-based amateur soccer organisations. Or how we've built better management of risk and crisis into our systems of governance, with vastly strengthened executive leadership that can do way more than simply manage sport programs. Or, fundamentally, and at the very least, how we've been able to show how important amateur soccer is to us all, in particular our youth, and how this extends beyond their physical well-being to their mental health. And before you tell me, yeah, we knew all of that before, Paul, I'd suggest that most of that knowledge was anecdotal. The pandemic has given world experts on youth mental health, like the excellent Professor Tracy Varian in Ottawa, Canada, the opportunity to move the link between sports and mental health from anecdotal rhetoric to evidence-based scientific fact. That in of itself is a quantum leap in terms of validation of the value of sport in the broader sense, but especially for soccer, given its broad societal appeal and global reach. Yes, this pandemic has been hell, particularly in some jurisdictions that have had rougher, longer-lasting public health restrictions than others. But there have been benefits, as I've outlined, and these benefits would simply not have occurred without the power of innovation that some had the courage to unleash. When we return, I'll be chatting with three fantastic North American soccer club leaders about how they've innovated their club's operations both during the pandemic and as we emerge from it. When we return on the Register Room, where amateur soccer goes off-field. Are you an amateur sport leader looking for quality professional development? If so, your search is over. Introducing Capitus Consulting's new sport business tutorial series. We'll teach you what you need to do to run your club better. These tutorials target the key areas of sport business: governance, risk, planning, marketing, technical oversight, sponsorship, and modern volunteerism. Access and enjoy these tutorials when you want and where you want.
Go to capituslearning.com
and get learning with me today.
Do you have a story to tell? The Register Room is built on real-world stories and experiences from amateur soccer clubs everywhere that we can explore, discuss, and learn from. Have you innovated a solution to a problem, challenged the norm, tried something different, thought outside the box, or taken a risk, and it's paid off? If so, we want to hear from you on the Register Room. Contact us today with your story at content@registerroom.com. And let's better the game with our shared soccer experiences.
Welcome back to the Register Room, where amateur soccer goes off-field. Paul Varian here, your host. As I mentioned before the break, today in the Register Room, we're exploring the theme of innovation, particularly as it pertains to the pandemic that we've all been enduring. So let's move now to our first guest to see how amateur soccer clubs out there are actually managing this. The city of Waterloo is a fast-growing satellite community in the tech belt outside Toronto, Canada. Prosperous and growing with many young families moving out of the Toronto area, the community thirsts for quality community sport programming, particularly for its youth. And the local soccer club there, Waterloo Minor Soccer Club, has impressively met this demand and has grown in recent years to now boast an enrolment of over 4,000 youth players, boys and girls, offering a range of soccer programs from recreational to competitive. Now, like all soccer clubs, the club was forced to shut down in March 2020 when the pandemic hit. But rather than waiting for the pandemic to blow through, the club decided to innovate and find a way to remain connected and of value to its players and membership throughout. The club's executive director, Paul Burns, led this charge. A veteran in amateur soccer club leadership, Paul's also worked for Ontario Soccer, the region's provincial governing body, and had a strong sense of what soccer needed to attempt to bring during this unprecedented pandemic lockdown. And he joins me today in the Register Room to talk about these times and what Waterloo Minor Soccer did to innovate around them. Paul Burns, Waterloo Minor Soccer Club, welcome to the Register Room, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on. And I think, Paul, it was probably about a year ago that we spoke last in the height of the pandemic, and we were talking about what life was like for you and for your organization as you and every other sports club out there had to navigate their way through it. And you said something to me that stayed with me ever since. And that was that you were just really taking this as an opportunity to try some new things. And there are some things that worked, some things that didn't work, some things you might consider retaining. And I was really intrigued by that because I think that was a very positive approach to take to a very difficult situation. And also really curious to know if that actually, translated into innovations and new things that you tried that you are looking at continuing with at the club. So I guess my first question is, how did you get to that idea that you were just going to try some new things in an environment where you were worried, I'm sure, about just the future of the organization and people's jobs, and are there things that a year on from here that you have decided you think you're going to keep at the club in a post-pandemic environment?
We were forced into, being open to change. When we're going through the pandemic and the closures and basically no soccer, we had to think differently. We had to think, how do we keep players engaged? How do we keep coaches engaged? How do we keep them thinking about the game? And obviously they can't be on the field together. So what can we do to, keep them together? And like many other clubs, we had Zoom training sessions and they went well for the first, I would say 3, maybe 4 months. And then, kids get bored of that. Right? They're not engaging with each other. So we said, okay, well, what else can we do that maybe isn't so instructional that the kids can interact? And we started thinking about, well, the kids like to be social. So let's create some social events. It still may be online, but at least it's events. And we started doing some viewing parties. So we'd pick a big Champions League game or a big game in the Premier League. And we would have events where teams can join together, watch the game together, and talk about the game, maybe talk about a player. We do some prizing as well, right? So maybe we'd have some questions during the game and ask players about something. It might be tactical. It just might be fun. We got a lot of really positive response about that. And we also noticed that Canadian kids weren't watching soccer. They might play it on the weekends, but very few of them actually sat and watched the game. And that was a bit eye-opening for us, learning more about the soccer culture and the soccer culture in Canada, where they are playing it, but they're not necessarily watching it or really engrossing themselves in the game. So that was one that went really well. I believe we're going to do more of it once we're able to be in person and have more like viewing parties and having the players together and really making the game interactive for them and getting them thinking about the game while they're not on the field.
That's really fascinating because, when you talk about, and I think it's probably more of a North American cultural thing than a European thing, but the idea of a youth sports club on this side of the Atlantic, it's really a sports program. It's almost commoditized a bit, isn't it? Particularly in big clubs. Whereas what you seem to have done very well, which is when the soccer's removed, you've replaced the sport with a community value add.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really what we're trying to build, at the club is that community and culture of the game, really getting them thinking about the game a lot more than just at training. One other thing we did, once we did start to get playing, although it was in a limited capacity in our recreational side, was we live streamed our recreational games. We did that out of necessity in the sense that parents could not be in the building because of COVID restrictions, but it still allowed them to watch their child and know they're safe, but see them participating and still get that feeling of, I've seen my child play this week, and it's just what parents are used to doing. They go watch the kid play soccer, and it was very well received. We had a lot of views every day or every time we had the games on. More than likely, we'll continue to do it because now we can offer it to the grandparents who might be across the country.
Yes.
And now, they can. Now it's not as if the production level is not what you're used to on cable TV.
No camera operation going on there, Paul.
No, but it's something, right? And again, it allows the grandparents to say, "I saw you play soccer today."
Yes,
and it was they really enjoyed that, and I think the parents really like that touch because they're so used to being with their child at soccer. They feel like they need to be there to protect them, to cheer them on, and that sort of thing. It gave them a comfort level. They really enjoyed that. And
yeah, I'm interested to know just to go back to the viewing parties. How did your coaches react to that? Because I know a lot of coaches really encourage their young players to watch soccer for obvious reasons, and so do match officials, I should say.
Yeah.
Did they embrace that? I mean, or did they struggle with sort of a different role that they would be now playing?
They really got on board. Again, we're trying to be that little bit different, offer them something that's a little bit new, and it's not always about X's and O's.
Moving on to how you as an organization, even you as a sport leader, Paul, have managed your way through this, because I've spent all of the pandemic, quite frankly, talking to a lot of people like yourself, and in some cases watching them get ground down further and further, and some of that is just the enormous stress of having to manage an operation in such times of uncertainty. But other parts of it was just the complete, being sent back to square one over and over again, having to rebudget and replan and open a program, then close a program, and the exhaustion of that, and not getting the gratification of seeing any soccer, which is probably why, people like you want to lead an organization like Waterloo Minor Soccer Club in the first place. How have you coped with that the last 18 months in that regard?
It has been difficult. There's been definitely ups and downs, but we also have to keep in mind that we have a purpose, and the purpose is to provide a safe, fun soccer program for kids in Waterloo. But we've always maintained a positive mindset as a group to provide soccer in the best way we can. And sometimes we did have to go just down to basics. Say, the number one thing is get them on the field. So how can we do it?
Right.
And it might not be their usual 3 times a week. It might have been once a week, but at least we're doing something. And the best thing I think we've seen is when we first came out of the first long lockdown, is the smiles and the chatter on the field, because they hadn't seen each other in so long.
You mentioned, Paul, just off air before we came on, and I asked you how you're doing, and you said, well, the kids were playing. Yes. And do you sort of, getting back to this idea of how you manage your way through the almost hopelessness of this at times, I'm sure it felt, is that how you manage it? You just simplify it and get down to the basics about what we're there to do and why that is good, and just try and block out all those variables and questions and uncertainties and just keep it singly focused on what you can control? Is that how you deal with things?
Yeah, a lot of times I do. And sometimes we just have to, put it down to the simplest form of, we're here to provide a soccer program. At the very core of it, we want and we need those players to be on the field. And as long as we're providing that for them in of course, a safe environment and a fun environment, then ultimately we've done our job.
Have you thought about what is the main thing you've learned over the last 18 months, you yourself personally and as a club?
Yeah, as a club, the one big thing that's always come up with just about every club, or even every business during the pandemic, is finances. It's really important to be able to be sustainable in that area, to have that cushion, if you say, that if something does happen like this again, it's not complete shutdown. And that is something that the club has been very good at, even before my time, and something the board is very, very diligent on and very supportive in. But it's also having a supportive board And we really do have that. They did not panic. They thought things through. We had long discussions about staffing and obviously programming and think about what we're going to do during the closures and how we're going to reopen.
I think great leaders just see opportunities. Poor leaders, when they're put in this situation, just see opportunities to fail. But clearly you've seen this as an opportunity to test your leadership or add different dimensions to it, which is great for you and credit to you. It's interesting you mentioned organizationally. You mentioned governance, good board leadership, and a strong balance sheet. As you know, in my book, Don't Blame the Soccer Parents, we devote a couple of chapters to those very areas. And this book was written before COVID, because at the end of the day, they may not be sexy topics. They may not be as exciting as winning a cup final, but they are absolutely essential for sustainability of your club as a going concern. And I've said to people all along, what would you like, a cheaper fee or no club at all? I'm hoping, a silver lining in this crisis is that it has shown many clubs the importance of managing financial risk, and that if you're saving some reserves, you're not being greedy, you're just being prudent, right?
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Paul Burns, Executive Director of Waterloo Minor Soccer. Thanks for joining us on the Regista Room.
Thanks very much, Paul. Enjoyed the chat.
Hey, amateur soccer club leaders. Are you looking for a complete reference on how to run a great amateur soccer club, but all you can find are books on how to coach kids? Introducing Amazon's #1 bestseller, Don't Blame the Soccer Parents, your complete guide on how to run a successful amateur soccer club, covering everything from managing your boardroom to overseeing your director of coaching or raising corporate sponsorship. Based on real-world experiences from internationally renowned sports consultant and professional speaker Paul Varian, Don't Blame the Soccer Parents rolls its sleeves up and tackles all the hands-on club management issues you need to master. Governance, planning, staffing, volunteers, finance, technical oversight, marketing, evaluation, and more. You'll find it all in the most comprehensive soccer club management reference on the market today. Pick up your copy on the Amazon platform or at don'tblamethesoccerparents.com today.
Imagine not having the chance to play sports as a kid. Imagine not having those memories, those experiences. Imagine your childhood without them.
If I wasn't able to play, I would have missed my friends. I would miss being active and the chance of being competitive. Basketball has taught me how to work as a team, how to communicate, and how to adapt to any situation. My goal is to play for Team Canada and make it to the WNBA.
The skills kids learn through sports are carried with them throughout their lives. But all across Canada, kids are being left on the sidelines because they don't have the resources to play. We owe all kids a chance to experience everything that sport has to offer. Help unleash the full potential in every child. Visit kidsport.ca so all kids can play.
Got a soccer business question you want Paul Varian to tackle on the Regista Room? Send it to us now at questions@registaroom.com.
My second guest today is from an amateur soccer club that's taken innovation way further than most have dared to go, and indeed further than some feel it should go. Seacoast United is a hugely successful amateur soccer club operating in New Hampshire, United States. Aside from running soccer programs, Seacoast also offer lacrosse, baseball, softball, and field hockey, and run a number of sports facilities serving various communities across the state of New Hampshire. Recently, the club has decided to embrace the technology that's captivating youth around the world and launch an esports program, adding it to their conventional sport mix. The innovation proved pivotal during the lockdown periods of the pandemic. I caught up with Seacoast United's Sales and Sponsorship Director, James Peterson, to discuss the bold innovation. Have a listen. James, welcome to the Regista Room.
Hey, Paul, how you doing? Really appreciate you extending this invite.
So can we just start by asking, what made you decide to actually go ahead and launch an esports program when so many people were just talking about it or even criticizing it in some cases?
If anyone thinks that what we've gone through, what we're still going through, and we're just going to revert back to normal proceedings, well, they're wrong. These interactions with video and working in a hybrid model remotely, et cetera. That's just going to be part and parcel of life moving forward. Things are evolving as we're speaking in terms of how people go about their daily lives. We believe that esports is something that is here to stay. And again, it aligns with what we try to do in terms of providing opportunities for people of all ages, all abilities. And when there was an opportunity last year to really look at how we went about, integrating that with our program, we jumped at the chance. We haven't had any of our families that have, come back to us from a negative perspective or kind of balked at what we're doing. Again, I think it helps that we're a multi-sport club, so at least people within our area know what we're all about, what our mission is as an organization. So I think that lended itself to, I would imagine the average person goes, okay, Seacoast United is doing esports. Well, the number one question is, what's esports? Yeah. And then two, well, they do other sports. So yeah, it's just something else that they're providing. But I thought we did a really good job of how we put it out there, because we put together, like, nothing elaborate. We put a little survey together and sent it out to our families and said, listen, this is something that we're looking to do as an organization. We're fully aware that your child is probably playing games, computer games, what have you, in some capacity. But if we're able to do something where putting into place the core values that we're doing with our other traditional sports, it's just through the medium of esports, really promoting that whole notion of teamwork, respect, because esports outside of that's probably like the wild, wild west. You don't know what your kids are doing half the time. So if we can put that in a controlled environment and it's aligning with all these ethos that we have, is that something you'd be interested in? Because we think this is a genuine opportunity for your child to take a hobby and put it in an area where they can develop and they can have fun in a safe and controlled environment. We would to say that it's been a success would be a massive understatement. So we looked at it we did some stuff in the spring. We did an exhibition game with a local community college, Great Bay Community College, who has an esports club. So their 18 and 19-year-olds were competing against our 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. And by the way, our 12, 13, and 14-year-olds were going toe-to-toe with them. So in no other sport would that ever happen, but it happens in esport because, again, it's you're taking that physical element where, if I'm 5 foot going up against a 6'8" person, I've got no chance, but it's irrelevant when you're playing in that environment. So that was really cool. The other thing, that we're really looking at now is this whole notion again of, regardless of your age or ability, that you have the ability, you have the access to esports. So we've had some really cool conversations with Special Olympics about how do we, because they're already looking at it as well. It's like, how do we provide this for your athletes that might be physically disabled? And so again, that's stuff that we didn't even think about. That's just kind of come through over the last couple of months, and I think that's a great testament to that specific sport, that because you're not confined by these physical constraints. In some respects, the opportunities are endless.
Yeah, but I charge that you wouldn't have those opportunities unless you've taken the first step into the space. So one leads to the other, right? You just builds out. But what I'm hearing, James, just to summarize a few very important themes around what I'm hearing through what you're saying, firstly, is just a culture of innovation at your organization. And through COVID, that became so important. It was the organizations that could think freely, that could pivot and move and be nimble in all areas across the operation, but also just think outside the box and innovate in terms of what a sports club could be, because we could be quite rigid thinking traditionally in what, this is soccer and this is field hockey and this is lacrosse, and that's the way it should be. So it seems you're not afraid to think freely and to back those ideas. And we could probably have an other podcast on the culture and your staff and how you're doing that. But the other thing just occurred to me, we're scared about losing kids to esports. But I'm sure you've picked up kids who want to now get involved in conventional sports through your esports programs. I'm sure there's a bit of backwash the other way. And the final piece you mentioned, which I think is really important, is, and listeners need to understand this, especially those who are skeptical of this, you're not stopping this esports train, folks. It is so powerful, and your kids are there. If you're running youth sports programs, they're already there. So, but James mentioned the idea of molding behavior. That if they're going to be involved in this, let's have them involved in it in a way that we can control their behavior, their thinking, their development, their ethos, their values around what we do for conventional sports, and bring it together under the banner of great human development, rather than, no, we don't believe in this, it's useless, it's not sports, it's taking kids away from the field of play, or whatever it might be. So great free thinking advice there, James. Once again, thanks for the second time coming on to the Regista Room. It's been tremendous speaking to you. Once again, listeners, seacoastunited.com to see the range of activities, both on field in terms of sporting programs, off field as well in terms of community development, community value adding stuff that the club is doing. They really are, I think, market leaders in so many areas. James Peterson, Marketing, Sales and Advertising Director, Seacoast United. Thanks once again for joining us on the Regista Room.
Thank you, Paul.
Need help managing your amateur sport organization but don't know where to turn? Look no further than Capitus Consulting, your dependable partner to help you through the challenges and issues you routinely face in and around your sport boardroom. At Capitus Consulting, we're different. We've directly managed amateur sport organizations from community club to national governing body. We understand your side of the fence because we've been there ourselves. We know from experience what makes sport organizations successful and where they go wrong. Reach out to us today at capitusconsulting.ca and let's start building your sport business today.
Want to tell us what you think of the show and things we could do to make it better? Tell us now at comments@registaroom.com.
Welcome back to the Regista Room, the podcast where amateur soccer goes off field. Your host, Paul Varian, delighted to have you with me today. My final guest today shows how the innovation we've learned during the pandemic can benefit us so well if we make the effort to institutionalize it into our organization's culture and systems of governance and operations. Pickering Soccer Club is a large amateur soccer club located in Toronto, Canada's eastern suburbs. 8 years ago, the club invested in a full-size indoor soccer facility, vastly increasing their programming capability during the winter months. Oh, and a quick note here to Regista roommates in Florida or Texas or California: we get a fair bit of snow up here in Canada in winter. Without large sports facilities that are indoor, programming is heavily compromised for extended periods of the year. So these facilities are really, really important to not only Canada, but of course, communities in northern states of the US as well. So in mid-January of this year, 2022, the Greater Toronto area was struck with one of the worst snow blizzards it's seen at that time of the year ever. Over 36 centimeters of snow fell in a single day, making it the largest single-day snow event the city's ever seen in January since records began. And this had a devastating impact on amateur soccer clubs in the region who ran indoor soccer dome facilities, such as Pickering Soccer Club. Here's the club's executive director, Matt Greenwood, to explain what happened and how the club had to move quickly to deal with it with new innovation capabilities they built over the previous 2 pandemic-dominated years. Matt Greenwood, Executive Director of Pickering Soccer Club. Welcome to the Regista Room, my friend.
Thanks very much, Paul. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'd love to have you on in more easy circumstances, Matt. But obviously we're talking today on the Regista Room about innovation, and a lot of the discussion on innovation has been about COVID-related innovation that's been forced on us the last couple of years. But you had a situation a few weeks ago where you had to innovate whether you liked it or not, related to this great Canadian weather we have. Obviously, a huge blizzard came in. I think it was 36 centimeters overnight. It was a record, I think, for Toronto, or close to. Right. Tell us a little bit about what happened, particularly in relation to your large indoor dome facility.
Thanks, Paul. It was certainly almost a once in a lifetime, certainly a once in a decade blizzard that came through Ontario and did a lot of damage to probably 17 or 18 domes across Ontario, one of them being ours. Usually our dome is fantastic in this sort of weather. And typically we have a landscaping crew that would come down, they'd clear the roadways around the dome. And then usually within 3 or 4 hours, the amount of snow that is on the roof sheds and they have to come back and do that again. This time that didn't happen. That snow and cold came in so quickly. It was blowing in sideways. It started to stick and build up on the west end of our dome. And the weight of that ultimately blew out the southwest corner. And our contractors advised us that the safest thing, rather than to let it just flap around in the wind and see what happened next, would be to shut off our fan and our backup fan and just let the dome come down under some sort of control. The nature of our facility is that it's a full-sized soccer field. We have some great space around the edges for sort of warm up behind the main goals. And then we also have a 4-lane running track on the far side of the dome. So with the dividing curtains between each of those, the mini fields that we have 4 quarter fields. As the dome came down, unfortunately, those blue dividing posts went straight through the roof of the dome, which we knew was an inevitable impact of this. So right now we're looking at the repair of those 6 holes, the fix of that southwest corner where it blew out. And then we have a pretty unique revolving door setup when you come into our facility. So you come from a brick-built building through the revolving doors, or we have an accessible person entrance in the middle, and then into the dome. And as the dome came down, it actually stayed attached to the revolving doors and pulled them away from the brick-built structure. So the first thing we're doing now is, the dust or the snow has settled, so to speak. The contractors are in today, and their first phase is detaching that revolving door, sticking it on the back of a flatbed truck and taking it to a manufacturer to hopefully repair it, retrieve it, and then get it back to us within the next month or so.
I've been inside this facility. Obviously, it's a fantastic indoor facility. It's relatively new, right? It's been last 10 years it went up?
Yep, 2014.
And at this time of year, I mean, it's really an essential piece of your facility-based through its program, right? How have you managed to deal with this being suddenly taken out of play and keep the programs going, or have you simply not been able to?
For our club programs, our technical staff and our recreational administrator jumped really quickly onto reorganizing this and finding available space where we could across the city of Pickering, Durham region, and then even sort of extending out into other parts of the greater Toronto area. So I would estimate that about 80 or 85% of our programming that we would normally be running as a club can still continue. Not always in the most ideal of settings, from the beautiful turf field that we have here to a gymnasium, hardcourt floor. It's a good opportunity for some of these teams to maybe experience futsal for the first time, but at least keeping them active.
So tell us how you went through that decision-making process and I guess designation of authority, because obviously in times of crisis, moving speed of thought into speed of action becomes really paramount.
It really separated into a sort of a competitive high performance and then a recreational management sort of structure. So between Dave Benning and Holly Babbitt, our Director of Soccer Operations and Grassroots Director, they knew what other facilities were out there that they believed would be possible to rent and that would meet the needs of that particular group of player. And then on the recreational side, because that number is significantly more, we're probably looking at about 800 or 900 players on the recreational side. That needed to be a closer working relationship with the city and the facilities that they have that they could get us into. The city of Pickering were fantastic. They have just refurbished their recreation centre and held off on any other bookings so that they could give us some priority to keep things running. They also identified a couple of community centres and they also engaged their economic development department, who are aware of any kind of unused warehouse space, big box store space that might have been a potential avenue for us. So we looked at everything, nothing was off the table. And thankfully, as I said, we've got about 85% of that in place in a variety. And it's great. People I think will now appreciate how wonderful the facility is and the fact that they can just come in and walk and know the Pickering Soccer Centre inside out. now they're having to shift somewhere different for a little while. It might open their eyes a little bit to what else is out there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I mean, just listening to you talk, Matt, you're able to obviously, sort of mobilize your management team very quickly, and there was a lot of very sharp and quick thinking there that was great. But it sounds to me like you didn't have to get bogged down in bringing this to your board, or that there's a level of executive authority that's given to your team there that enabled you to put this into play pretty quickly.
There is. I think over the past 2 years, and kind of, as I think we're all hoping this is coming out of the pandemic, we did build up a good relationship between the management staff and the board, to the point where throughout the pandemic, we were meeting on a weekly basis, really sometimes just to check in and see how each of us was doing. Sometimes just to, bounce thoughts around about the pandemic numbers, infection rates, what we were kind of seeing and hearing from sort of all of our different sources and experiences. And sort of coming out of the pandemic, I think that built up a level of, not respect, because I think that was already there, but a kind of an understanding that, we as a staff know what we're doing. Let us go out there and identify and book up these facilities and keep things moving. As we've done multiple times, it's that good old word pivot. But sometimes it's been a week to week. Sometimes it might even be a day-to-day pivot. But needing to be able to adjust and make those decisions quickly, as you said, without getting too bogged down in sort of board approvals or engagement and lengthy meetings, has really helped us come through this in a other than the dome being as flat as a pancake, come through this in a really good position. There's kind of a board experience that they know programs, they know soccer programs, they know how and what a soccer club should look like and how it should be run. There were so many new things that got thrown at us with this pandemic that unless you were in this full time and up to your neck in it, it was very hard to keep up with, the changes and restrictions at the federal or provincial level, or even at the regional level. So living and breathe it every day, and then being able to adjust, being able to provide that advice or input back to the board, so they were aware of how quickly things are changing, that we are a step ahead, or at least on top of it. And then being able to process that into some communication pieces that we could then share with our membership.
And I love what you've actually done with this current crisis is, you've got a hashtag, I think it's called raise the roof, isn't it? And you're sort of telling the story and looks like you're trying to make it into sort of a club bonding experience. What is it they say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And you're sort of telling the story and showing the rigor of the club at the same time as obviously dealing with the crisis. That's obviously something you're consciously doing and trying to drive, right?
It is from a number of different angles. One, to keep the membership engaged and reassured that this isn't the end of the world. We thought the last 2 years was the end of the world, so we'll get through this again. We want them to be informed of the progress, but also it's a catalogue. It's a way of kind of putting on record what we've done and how we've done it. And heaven forbid this were ever to happen again. We've got all of that on file. Help us improve further down the line.
Yeah, and I wonder whether, sometimes, particularly with very big clubs like you run there, where there's thousands of participants, and there's a risk the club can become almost commoditized at times, isn't there? And these stories actually build heritage into your club. Like, you hope that 10 years from now, people will be like, oh, do you remember when the snow brought down the dome and what we did then as a club to get by? And these little stories build a club, I think, beyond just simply being a collection of programs.
You're absolutely right. It's we want to see the membership as more than just a customer or a consumer. And if we have ways to do that like this and sort of almost break down those barriers, we did a frontline workers appreciation tour. Back in May of 2020. It seems like ages ago now. But when we were first able to actually sort of get outdoors and did a convoy around the local hospital, the fire engine, the fire station, the EMS crews. We just kind of honked horns and let people know that we were appreciative of them. And it's simple little things like that as clubs we can do. Doesn't really cost anything at all and helps engage and makes people feel like they're more than just a customer or a consumer.
I should say, I'm just glad nobody was hurt in this instance, that the dome didn't come down with anyone inside and that everyone's safe and well. And it seems like you're managing another very difficult situation with complete distinction. So So we wish you all the best at Pickering Soccer Club. We hope your dome is back up as soon as possible and everyone can enjoy what goes on inside there. As you say, in the meantime, they can remember what it was like for the rest of us as boys and girls growing up before they had this dome technology, and you just did the best you can in gyms and so on. So not a bad idea for them to see that and see what a great dome they have there when they can get back in. But in the meantime, best of luck with the continued renovations, and thanks for joining me on the Regista Room today.
Great stuff. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. I look forward to catching up in person soon. Take care.
Very much so. Take care. So, 3 examples of how your peer amateur soccer clubs are impressively innovating their way through COVID-19 and beyond into the future. Although the pandemic has been hard, there has been a silver lining, and amateur soccer clubs' new ability to innovate is just one. Before we close this episode, there's one very important commonality across these organizations and others I've seen that are mastering innovation and making it the norm in their amateur soccer organizations that I want to highlight for you. And it is that of trust. Look at these organizations and the leadership in them. They are able to try new things, take risks, which is an inherent component of innovation, fail if necessary, and move quickly without having to run up a bureaucratic chain of command to ask for permission. I'm not saying amateur soccer organizations should be without checks and balances and authority levels, but the fundamental ingredient in all these organizations' success with innovation is the empowerment of executive management by boards of directors. So, any board member Regista roommates listening to this, empower your management. Trust their decision making. And if you don't trust their decision making, change them out and bring in people who you do. It's an essential element of a well-functioning board and your ability to get the best out of your management team. And Regista roommates listening to this who are in management, take this idea and drive it throughout your organization. Drive trust and innovation hand in hand as the predominant culture in your people. Yes, there will be screw-ups. The odd person might even take advantage of it. But the benefits will greatly outweigh the downsides. Whether it's being able to trust someone to properly work from home, or move quickly to reassign programs if a building collapses, or to have the courage to try something completely new and untested. A culture of trust and innovation is one that everyone wants to be part of and gains from most. My name is Paul Varian. You're in the Regista Room where amateur soccer goes off field. Thanks for joining me today. Until the next time, stay safe and well, friends.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Regista Room, where amateur soccer goes off-field. Join us again for the next episode. Subscribe today at capituslearning.com or listen wherever you access your favorite podcasts.